Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm going to be taking you through the process of utilizing Zoom Workplace to help you with your notes. And so, one thing we all have to realize is that whenever we're doing a Zoom meeting, there are built in features to assist you in making sure that your notes are not only up to par, but they are access compliant. And so, real briefly, if I was to start a brand new meeting right now, and obviously, when I click on this meeting, I'll open it. It's only going to be um, myself in it, but I just want to do this to kind of show you. One of the things that you'll notice immediately is what we call the note taker option and the AI assistant. I always have this set to automatically take notes during my sessions. And the reason for that is there's this cool little feature in Zoom that literally is copying every single thing that you're saying throughout the actual um, meeting, but it's also copying every single thing that your client is saying. Now, a lot of us get a little hesitant about this because we're like, well, what about HIPAA compliance, etc.? Well, one thing that's amazing about Just One Life Services is that our Zoom platform, everything that we utilize within it, it's the HIPAA compliant version. And so you're safe, and most of your clients have already signed on or authorized being us using AI as a way to support them. And so, that being said, whenever you have this little feature utilized, what ends up happening is it's recording everything in your meeting. And so at the end of your meeting, it gives you not only the transcript, but what we call a meeting summary. And so I'm going to just close this real quick because we're not here to show you how to have a meeting, but I am here to show you what ends up happening after that meeting. And so because that one was just myself, we're not going to use that as our example, but we are going to use one that I created earlier. And so I've got a practice session with the one and only Jamie Appleseed, which you guys all know is an individual within our simple practice that doesn't really exist, but that we can always use as a way to practice. And so if I've got a peer support session set for 11:30 a.m. to 12 o'clock p.m. for this particular client, and I've just completed it, obviously I need to add a note, right? And so when I scroll down here, you see the add note button. You can actually add the note this way, or I can click on her name and add the note from the screen that opens. But for simplicity, I'm just going to click add note right here. And so when I click on add note, what pops up is something that's not relevant, right? This one says VRJT peer support training progress note. That's not the session we had. We had a peer support session. So I'm going to come into this drop down menu and I'm going to select SOAP note. And the reason I select SOAP note is you guys know we always report this objective, the assessment, and the plan. And so, that being said, because she's not a real client, I'm going to go ahead and select not applicable for her access ID. Because I met with her and her alone, it's an individual session. And obviously, it's telehealth because it's online. And right here where it says, is the session being conducted via Zoom? I'm always going to check yes, and then I'm going to say where she was. I typically write private residence, but depending where she is, that's going to determine, right? In this 30-minute session, there were no breaks, and so obviously we're going to write not applicable. The goals of this session were to support her, and so one of her goals is to use her lived experience to help other people, but the most important aspect of this particular session was to obtain stable employment within 90 days. And in excess of that, to learn how to set SMART goals for employment. Okay, and so those are the things that she wanted to work on. Now, the specific objectives being worked on in this session, it's a peer support session. So we are obviously, and don't mind my typos, we're going through peer support, but because it's job related, we're going to focus on 3 vocational skills required to obtain employment as a peer support specialist. And then we always try to develop at least one new healthy coping strategy that will help that client maintain recovery. And so historically, I would go in and I would write the subjective, which would be the purpose of the session, what I see as far as like how the client showed up, etc. Then the objective, which would be literally what I see, what I hear, what they say. Then the specific interventions that were used by us, the peer, to assist the client, and then an assessment of their progress as well as their plans. And so for many years, I've had the ability to do this very well. But what I've learned is that it can be tedious and it can also take a long time when you've got a heavy client list on a single day. And so in the modern technology driven world, artificial intelligence has made its way into the behavioral healthcare field. And many of us meet it with a little bit of resistance because it's not personal, but I do want to show you guys how to utilize it to your best ability, right? And so, as I said, I just had a session with Jamie, and so because of that, Zoom recorded the session. And so when I click on this meeting, right, or this link right here that says My Notes, you're gonna see all of the notes from that particular session pop up. And so this was my session that I had with Jamie, and it'll show you the key outcomes. Jamie's experiencing unemployment related stress affecting household finances and family dynamics. Franklin, acting as both a peer supporter and employment specialist, provided structured guidance on job searching, resume updating, and goal setting. And then a follow up resume building session was scheduled for next Tuesday at 12 with clear homework assigned to Jamie before then. And so, as you guys know, we don't tell people what to do, but we support them as they figure out what they want to do for themselves. And so, this breakdown pretty much gives you an overview of everything that happened in that particular 30-minute session. The decisions and agreements talk about the resume overhaul, me creating a mock up template for her so that when we do meet, she can actually use that template to create new resumes, having her send me a current version of her resume, coming up with 3 to 5 targets, etc. Now you will notice in Zoom, whenever you use this feature, there's a little number after each little insight or bullet point, I guess I could say. And these are actual citations. And so this particular information comes directly from this particular portion of the conversation. And so everything is accurate to the transcript, obviously with a margin of error because it's AI, right? And so when I look at this, it talks about decisions and agreements. It talks about feedback exchange, right? So noted Jamie's resume is likely outdated, not optimized for AI and keyword based applicant tracking because that's the formal way that people are actually like filtering out client or it's not clients but potential employees nowadays. Then observed that Jamie's applications may be going unread due to lack of that alignment. Affirmed her awareness of potential burnout as a sign of mutual support, and previous remote role identified as financially stable but potentially contributing to her own personal burnout. And then when we talk about pending confirmation, right? Exact salary target, right? So one of the things that she had not yet done is figured out what her target is, and so she needs to determine that job or that base salary per job category that she's interested in, as well as having a conversation with her partner to kind of figure out what income level would realistically relieve pressure in the household. Um, and then her job categories had not yet been narrowed down, but she acknowledged that she needed to kind of focus in on this. And then it even highlights the action items that were discussed during the session. So Jamie's going to send her current resume. She's going to calculate her specific salary, identify those job categories, discuss financial expectations with her partner, and then the peer, myself in this case, prepare resume mock-ups, including peer support focused template ahead of the next session. And then our next one-on-one is scheduled for Tuesday at 12 o'clock for that resume building session. And so as you guys are already aware of, whenever we're writing documentation, we never use the client's name. And so we have a couple different options here. I typically take all of this formatted information, and I personally like Gemini as my um, way of utilizing AI. And so I'm going to show you that route first. You can also do this within Zoom, but I'm going to show you the way that I do it most consistently for simplicity and for ease of your understanding. And so you'll notice I'm highlighting all of this information, right? And I'm going to copy it, right? But when I drop it in here, It does not have any direction. So you'll see over here, this is my Gemini window, and I'll make it bigger right now just because it'll help us for the moment. And so you'll see I've dropped in everything that was documented in that note, but this doesn't tell Gemini what to do. And so one thing I'm going to be sharing with everyone as a baseline, but I encourage you to come up with your own version, is what I call my AI Zoom prompt for SOAP notes. And so when I go into this particular document, if I click all the way to the top and I press Shift Return, because Shift Return actually makes spaces, and then I Command V, I just copy and pasted my very own Zoom simple practice note, or I guess you could say prompt for AI. And so you'll see it says create a comprehensive SOAP note for a client attending blank session. And then it talks about replacing name. Well, if I was teaching the PRSS training, this would change to PRSS training session, right? But as you guys know, that's not what I just did with Jamie. It was an employment session, but technically it fell under the peer support H0038 code. And so because it fell under that code, I know that that's the one I want to use because I want my documentation to reflect that. Now, I've already written in my name, Franklin, here, but I have a blank space for the client, right? Because as you saw in that particular note output from Zoom, it says the name Jamie. And I'll show you again Jamie, Jamie, Jamie. It's everywhere. Well, I don't want that in the output. I would rather the client's name, Jamie, be replaced with client or even, comma, the client where relevant, right? As a matter of fact, that's already there. So I can fix this to look like that or the client. And then it says, and replace the name Franklin, which would obviously be your own name, with your title. And so I'm a BHT PRSS. And so I've already got it saved in there where it says replace with the name Franklin with BHT PRSS. Then I address the note. Create the note using specific and direct quotes from the session. It will be able to draw those particular quotations directly from the citations that are used, right? It's kind of amazing to watch it work. And then include them in the observation and the assessment portions of the output. Make sure to output final draft in paragraph format, avoiding unnecessary bullet points or tables and graphs. The reason I specifically outline that is that I typically write with a lot of bullet points and things, and because Gemini kind of learns your style, it'll think that's what you want all the time. Well, with a SOAP note, I'm already using the SOAP note template structure, and so it doesn't make sense for me to have all of those things when I know I need the subjective, the objective, the interventions, the assessment, and the plans. And so the other thing that I do specifically, I ask it to separate the BHT PRSS interventions into a short list separate from the SOAP note information. And so what that means is outside of the subjective, the objective, the assessment, and the plans, it's going to list the interventions that I actually used. And if you aren't aware, whenever we're utilizing interventions, this is what we've done to help the client. And so if I instructed the client, I would write PRSS instructed. If I demonstrated something, I would say PRSS demonstrated. I wouldn't just continue the sentence, right? It would never be instructed the client, blah, 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 whatever, right? Instead, it would be PRSS instructed the client, blah, 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 blah. Okay? Just want to make sure you're aware of that, but we'll leave that blank for now. Now, coming back, I also want them to include details from whether it's the course or it's the session, how it directly correlates with the client statements. And so I'm not teaching the peer support course right now. And so I will change this to from session and how they correlate directly with client statements. And then always use the third person for the entire note point of view because we write in the third person and use the data provided. So you'll see here it says copy and paste the data from the Zoom meeting summary directly. Well, that was the first thing I did. So I can delete that because that is all of this information. And so now that I've got this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow the Gemini platform to create a SOAP note. Now, I want to warn you, it's not a foolproof system. Just because you run something through Gemini does not mean it's always going to be perfect to your liking. And so I'm going to show you what the original output looks like, and then I'll show you how I proofread it to check to see if it needs any adjustments. And so let's go ahead and jump in. Click submit right here, and let's let the magic happen. And just like that, it's created a SOAP note for me. But just because it created the SOAP note, it does not necessarily mean that it's perfect. You'll also notice here my interventions are separated. And so these become the things that I will drop into that note, right? And so let's go take a look from the top. For the subjective, the client reports experiencing significant unemployment related stress that is negatively impacting household finances and overall family dynamics. The client expresses a clear preference for full time remote work arrangements to accommodate daily school pickups and drop offs for their children. The client notes that while a previous remote role provided financial stability, it potentially contributed to personal burnout. Additionally, the client shares awareness regarding their partner's potential burnout, recognizing it as an indicator of mutual support and stress within the home. The client acknowledges the need for an outside perspective to help narrow down 3 to 5 specific job categories to focus their search on. Currently, the client has not yet discussed specific financial expectations with their partner to align on a realistic income goal, nor have they calculated exact salary targets per job category, stating they need to determine a specific number to accurately relieve household pressure. This is the epitome of what the subjective is. This tells us exactly why we're meeting, more than it just being a single, hey, they want to work on employment goals. It highlights the issues that they're dealing with. And so I've copy and pasted that from here. I'll simply come over here and paste that in, right? And so my subjective, pretty on point. Now, when I come over here and I look at the objective, the BHTPRSS, which basically means that used to say Franklin, but now it says BHTPRSS because I've built that into the prompt, conducted a structured peer support and employment specialist session focused on job searching, resume updating, and goal setting. Now, I know immediately that employment specialist session doesn't really make sense to me. So I'm going to kind of mark that in my head because I'm probably going to adjust the wording on there, right? And so, that being said, the client actively engaged in the session, agreeing to adopt a SMART goal framework to define specific salary targets rather than relying on vague financial benchmarks. The BHT PRSS observed that the client's current resume is likely outdated and not optimized for modern AI and keyword based applicant tracking systems. The BHT PRSS noted to the client that their applications may be going unread due to a lack of keyword alignment rather than a lack of effort to affirm their efforts. Direct quotes from the client during the observation of the resume review included, I need an outside perspective to focus, and I want to make sure I'm accommodating school pickups and drop offs. The client and the BHT PRSS established an agreement for a complete resume overhaul. And so immediately when I copy this, I know that it's pretty on point, minus one part that I didn't feel lined up, right? And so here, instead of this saying a specialist, I feel that it's more appropriate to say assistance because that's what it really was, an employment assistance session, right? That's what we really were discussing. And then for the interventions, I'm going to skip over these right now just because of the order of the output of the AI support. And so we'll come back to these interventions used here momentarily and we'll move to the assessment. And so when I come over here and I look at the assessment, it basically states the client presents with clear situational anxiety and stress related to long term unemployment and its subsequent impact on family dynamics and financial stability. The client demonstrates high motivation to gain employment, as evidenced by their willingness to immediately implement a structured job search strategy. The BHT PRSS assesses that the client possesses valuable transferable skills from previous remote roles, but requires direct assistance to overcome technological barriers in the modern hiring market, such as ATS optimization. The client's recognition of partner burnout displays strong relational awareness and protective factors for the family unit. During the assessment of barriers, the client stated, my applications might just be going unread, and I haven't had the conversation with my partner yet about the exact income level we need. The client responds positively to peer support intervention, showing readiness to utilize, the SMART goal framework to manage their financial planning. And so right here, We take that and we drop it in. Now, mind you, you're always able to change things as you see fit, add things that you wanted to. I don't want you to feel like you're locked into this. This is your baseline, right? This gives you your structure. And then when we come to the plan, typically people just list a few things. I like the way this output is because it actually helps you really prioritize what needs to happen from both sides of the fence because plans are next steps for both parties. And so here it says the client and the BHT PRSS will meet for their next scheduled one-on-one resume building session next Tuesday at 12 o'clock p.m., which we know to be valid. Prior to that next session, the client will complete assigned homework, which includes emailing their current resume to the BHT PRSS today, identifying 3 to 5 target job categories to enable the creation of tailored resumes, calculating specific salary targets for each category, and discussing financial expectations with their partner to align on a realistic income goal. And then the BHT PRSS will prepare those tailored resume mockups, which is typically the Google resume mockups or things like that, including a peer support focused template, because obviously, if she's working with us, there's a high probability she's trying to become a peer, to optimize for keyword compliance ahead of the next session. The focus of the next session will be reviewing the client's target categories, analyzing the financial breakdown, and constructing the new resume templates, or I guess I could say resumes based off of those templates, right? And so when I take this plan and I come over here to drop it in, I'm going to change this to constructing the new resumes based on, excuse me, the provided templates. Okay. And then obviously, most important thing we always have to make sure is that we've confirmed the calendar appointment length, actual session length, and the billing units. And so when I go back up here and I'm like, we met from 11:30 to 12 o'clock, it's accurate. And so I can already click on that just as a reminder. That's required if ever you're trying to save your meeting. I mean, excuse me, try to save your document and it doesn't save. Oftentimes that's the issue. But we got to go back to the interventions before we wrap it up. And so you'll see right here, it's listed the different interventions. So the first one, the BHT PRSS reviewed the client's job search history, identified the client's applications were likely trapped in keyword-based applicant systems rather than failing due to a lack of effort, directly validating the client's frustration regarding unread applications. And so that's a perfect example of what the BHT did to support the client. But when you come here, those aren't necessarily instructed, demonstrated, explained, or challenged. And so I'll click right here where it says other, and I'll go ahead and paste that in. Now, what's cool is that even though it doesn't show it on the note itself, I can keep writing in this space. And so the next thing, the BHT PRSS introduced and implemented the SMART goal framework to transition the client from a vague financial benchmark to defining specific calculated salary targets per job category, addressing the client's statement that they need to determine a number to relieve household pressure. And so I can take that complete sentence, bring it right over here to the end, and I'm going to press Command V or Control V again, and now it's been added to that same other box, and I just give myself a space again. Here, the BHT PRSS explored the client's family dynamics, affirming the client's proactive awareness of their partner's potential burnout as a positive sign of mutual support while balancing it against the client's past remote work experiences. And so I'll come right here, copy that. I feel like I don't want it to be too much in one, so I'll click on the next other category and I'll add it right there, give myself a space, and come over for this last one. The BHT PRSS established an immediate collaborative workflow by volunteering to create the mock-up templates, including a peer support focused option, which they don't necessarily know. It's not us creating it, it's utilizing the ones we already have established in exchange for the client committing to send their current resume today and narrowing down 3 to 5 target job categories to resolve the client's stated need for an outside perspective to focus. And so, what this shows is exactly what we preach: collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. And so, it's a collaborative effort. Both of us are bringing something to the table. And so once all of that has been done, this particular thing I no longer need it. So, and I can actually close this now because as you'll see, I have my document completed. And so when I come over here to Jamie Appleseed, I will always just best practice, start at the top and just double check everything. Make sure the residence is there, make sure the access ID is there, come from the top to the bottom, make sure the goals and everything line up with what we've discussed. And you'll see how I said learn how to set SMART goals. Well, you saw how that showed up in the output, right? Then we've got the subjective, we've got the objective, the interventions have been utilized, and you only select the ones that you're using. If it doesn't fit these, you put it under the other category. Keep things, doesn't necessarily have to be complete sentences, but always highlight that it's you, the BHT PRSS, that's doing the work. You don't necessarily have to put BHT PRSS. You could just put PRSS, but I find it best to have my full title because that's what I sign with. The assessment of progress with the little changes that I made, the plans for next session with the little changes that were made, and the provider has confirmed. From that point, I click save, and then you can see what the output looks like, right? This is what the actual note will look like. And you'll see it's got everything there. It's not just what was talked about. It's filled out in a way that says, no, no, this is really what was done. And so you got to remember this, right? With audits, we never know who's going to pick up this paperwork and take a look at it. Well, 99% of the time, they have no idea who you are, what you did, or what was supposed to happen. And so it's our duty to make sure that our documentation shows the who, the what, the where, the why, the when, and the how. And so this particular practice assists you in doing that. And so I hope this helps. You'll notice the interventions, as I said, even though you couldn't see it, first sentence ends there, second sentence pops there, right? First sentence ends right here, second sentence pops there. And so it's very clean on the output. Now, to many of you, this might look a little bit wordy. Well, it was a wordy session. There was a lot of things that were actually done in that short 30 minutes. But the reality is, it's taking me much longer to explain this to you than it would typically take me to actually do the documentation. And so I encourage all of you to use AI to your benefit. If you go to your meeting and you try to turn on the notes or the AI and you get a message that says host has disabled this for this particular meeting, reach out to your team lead and ask them to contact Justin Harvey to make sure that that setting is on. And hopefully this will change your life. And this is why us as team leads look at you with trepidation anytime someone says, I didn't have time to get my notes done. This will change your life, and you can guarantee have your notes done within 10 to 15 minutes of a session being completed, as opposed to not being able to hit that 24-hour benchmark. If you have any questions, reach out to your team lead, or you can contact me directly. I hope this helps. Appreciate you paying attention and listening for this long. Have a wonderful rest of your day.